I know they're mostly covered in snow still, but they won't be for much longer. And I'm so excited for this year's gardens. All right, guys, it's March. Last year, I think I did my first garden tour in April, and I thought I would make a video this month of what our plans are for the gardens this year. Last year, our first summer here, we had set up a garden right by the house that was about 52 by 70. And I'm really happy with how well it went. We are expanding this year though, and we're gonna have a second garden plot on the other side of the house. So I thought I would go through my plans of what I'm gonna have planted in each and why. So the garden plot that we started last year is going to be what I refer to as the kitchen garden. And the reason why I call it the kitchen garden is because number one, it's right off of the porch where the door goes into the kitchen. Eventually, this is gonna be a space that's primarily filled with perennials, things that we're gonna be eating fresh, stuff that we want to be able to grab easily while we're in the middle of cooking, like herbs or tomatoes. And it's also gonna have a lot of flowers and things incorporated into it. So it's not gonna be solely focused on production. The new garden plot is gonna be twice the size. It's 50 by 150. And this is what I am calling the crop garden. It's mainly gonna be focused on large quantity, just really high production. So these are the things that in our zone, which is 5B, we can actually grow a significant amount of, even close to a year's worth of. So they need a lot more space just because of the amount that we're growing, but also it's gonna be the place where I put things that just take up a lot of room. So like my melons, my squash, my pumpkins, things that really need to be able to spread out. And I don't wanna use my valuable kitchen garden space to dedicate for that kind of stuff. So last year, when we started the kitchen garden, we hadn't done any prep work the fall before. We had just moved into this house, so we didn't really have time or the thought to like prep gardens. Thankfully, last fall, I was able to get a little bit of work done on the new crop garden, knowing that I wanted it. And we put our chickens on about half of it to just till and fertilize for the few months at the end of fall. And then I also had a neighbor come and spread 2 loads of manure on the majority of it. Another neighbor who dropped off some old hay that I just laid down in a really thick layer to kind of break down and start adding some organic matter into the soil. So some challenges that we're gonna have with the crop garden this year is that it has been an alfalfa field for several years, and it's been commercially farmed, meaning that when it's harvested, there are semis that drive on it in order to carry the alfalfa off. It's incredibly compact. It is like concrete out there. We actually have some fruit trees that we put in, and it was hard even just for Tommy to get a shovel in the ground because it was so compact. I'm trying to decide if I even want to bother tilling into that soil or if I really just want to start building new soil from the top up. I think as of right now, our plan is if we can find somebody to do just an initial till on it this year before we plant things, then we'll do it. But then from there, we will probably continue to do our preferred method of just no tilling and just continuing to build on the soil each year. So over the winter, I made a list of the crops that I want to put in each garden spot. So this is the kitchen garden. This is the crop garden. As you can see, the crop garden, which is twice as big, actually has only like a third of the varieties in it, but they're gonna be much larger quantities. I don't have super high hopes for like the best yield this year just because of what we're dealing with its current soil health level. But I do have a plan in some ways that I can maybe boost what we do plant over this year. So that way it's, you know, still worth the effort we're gonna put in. So this is my plan for laying it out. This is again 50 and it's by 150. The last 50 by 50 plot is gonna be all sunflowers, which partly is just for aesthetics, but it's also a great way to break up the soil. We can use the sunflower seeds for feeding livestock over the winter time, and that will be just kind of a bonus space at the end that we'll put in after the last frost. I'll also add that I'm planning to do the crop garden in a market garden style, which means I'll have 30-inch rows with 18-inch walkways in between, and they'll be 50 feet long each. I love to use graph paper when I'm planning out my garden plots. Sometimes if I'm doing really intricate detail, I will use the Mother Earth News Garden Planner program that they have online. As you can see, when you do it on a large scale, really repetitive, it's kind of pointless, but just to give you an idea of what I'm planning and how I'm laying it out. I did plant my garlic last fall in the very first row. So after the chickens were on this area, I covered it in a thick layer of mulch. I actually composted the entire row, and then I planted my garlic and put straw on top. So that's the first thing that's out there already. Next, I will have 3 rows of tomatoes. Then I'm gonna do a couple rows dedicated to different types of melons, a couple rows dedicated to different types of squash. And then I have a few, I think I might have actually had 3 different varieties of corn I got seeds for that I'll succession plant so that where they're not cross-pollinating. And then it will be the pumpkin patch right before we hit the sunflowers. I mentioned this was an alfalfa field, which if you know much about alfalfa, you know that it is incredibly deeply rooted. And whether we get it tilled or not before we plant, it's gonna be a feat to stay on top of the weeds that come up. So to try to make it as low maintenance as possible, I'm actually going to use landscape fabric for the majority of the crop garden this year, just to keep it as easy to manage as possible. So everything except for the corn and the garlic and the sunflowers will actually have woven weed fabric covering it with holes burned just directly where I'm planted. So there won't be just tons and tons of space for weeds to get through. If they want to get through, it'll be right at the point at the base of the plant itself. And then hopefully as summer goes on, that'll get shaded out so that way it will be as weed-free as possible. I'm really excited and I'm really grateful that we were able to invest in that weed fabric because it was a pretty big area. You figure it's covering about a 50 by 75 or 80 foot area. The second thing we're gonna do to try to make it as maintenance free as possible is that we bought the materials to set up a drip irrigation system. So I won't have to go out there and move sprinklers around or hand water any of that crop garden. Getting it set up is going to be a big job in itself. So that is the crop garden. Now let's talk about the kitchen garden. Like I said, last year was our first growing year for the kitchen garden. And at the end of the growing season, we pulled out, as many plants as we could. And then we actually put our 2 pigs in there to till and fertilize and eat up any leftover crops that we didn't get. And then I deeply mulched it with a bunch of old hay from our neighbor, and it's been sitting there under mulch all winter. I'm really excited about the soil quality over there. It's going to be much better than what the crop garden is, but it'll be just nice to have that kind of second year groundwork done. I mentioned the kitchen garden eventually is going to have a lot of perennials and things in it. That'll be both flowers and I hope to have a lot of different berry varieties as well as rhubarb and asparagus. And I'm going to add some more of those things this year. I added a few of each of them last year, but I also am really focusing this year on just being as efficient as possible with this space, because there are things that our family needs and wants to produce large quantities of. Taking out, number one, things like melons and stuff that really is a space sucker is going to be helpful, but also just really determining what our priorities are. And you'll be able to tell pretty quick by what I give the most space to, what we like to grow a lot of. So you can see in my list the perennials I mentioned. I currently have some asparagus, rhubarb, blueberries, and strawberries, but I want to add some raspberries and a couple more blueberries this year. And then most of these will get planted out come springtime. Some things will get a second succession as well later. I'm not going to do a ton of flowers this year, again, just because of efficiency of space, but we do have a few rose bushes, and I love zinnias and marigolds, so those will make their way throughout it as well. So this one I did on my graph paper, but I actually am going to be more going off of my Mother Earth news plan that I made on the computer, just because it helps me kind of get a better idea for how many I can fit in my rows. So this is basically the same layout that I had last year as far as the perimeter beds. I have 4 raised beds here in the middle, and then last year I had 4 rows on this side and 4 rows on this side. This year, as you can see, I'm dedicating almost probably a third of the square footage just to potatoes. And again, the reason for that is simple. We're a big family. Potatoes are fairly easy to grow. They are fairly easy to store for a long period of time, and we like them. So we want a lot of them, just like we want to have a lot of tomatoes. So they are going to get a really, really big area in the garden. I went back and forth about whether or not I should put them in the crop garden, because obviously they are one of those larger quantity crops that we want. But ultimately, with the soil being what it is out there and tomatoes being obviously a root vegetable, I just did not think that they would thrive. So I know that the soil in this garden is solid and it'll be a good environment for them. So that's where they're gonna go this year. So I'm not gonna tell you exactly where I'm planning to plant everything, but this is where you enter the garden from the porch coming off of the house. There's roses on either side. And most of our perennials are on the outside beds. And then this area here is where the kids do their garden. So these 5 rows right here, which I'm splitting the 4 rows I had last year into 5 this year, they're gonna be a little bit skinnier. They'll be 30 inches just like the other rows in the crop garden, and then 18-inch walkways versus last year I had 4-foot wide beds with 2-foot walkways, and it was overkill. It wasn't necessary, so I'm trying to be more efficient with the space. But as you can see, I have zucchini. I am gonna have a row of tomato plants in here just so that when we wanna eat them fresh, we can go and we can grab them close by and not have to go all the way to the crop garden. I have a row of onions, and then I actually have 2 long rows of onions as well. There are 2 rows of carrots. This is gonna be a row of broccoli, and then actually this whole entire fence line is almost completely brassicas. I was pretty happy with the success I had with brassicas last year. It was the first time since gardening 7 or 8 years that I ever successfully grew brassicas. So this year, I just wanna have more. I wanna have enough that we can put some in the freezer for the winter time. These 2 raised beds will stay strawberries with their arches to have cucumbers on them. And then I'm gonna try sweet potatoes for the first time. I have this little block in the middle that was just kind of dead space last year, but I've seen other people in Michigan growing sweet potatoes, and that would be really exciting to have. Over here on this outside fence line are mainly just peas and then peppers with lettuce kind of hopefully shaded by the peppers a little bit to make it last. And then in these raised beds, I'll have more greens and herbs, and I'm sure I'll have greens and herbs kind of tucked in other places wherever there is space available. I would also really love to, and we'll see how it goes with having a new baby and all the other things going on around here during the summertime. I would love to work this year on getting the pathways done. So grass pathways, they're just really hard to maintain in my opinion. I would love to have all of our pathways wood chipped. So what I'm hoping to do is just starting from the gate, working my way around the perimeter initially, putting down cardboard, putting down really deep layers of wood chips. And I think that aesthetically, it will look a lot neater than just keeping it mulched or keeping it grass. But it's gonna be a job because it's a lot of walkway space. So I don't know that I'll have enough wood chips or enough time or energy to devote to that this year, but it's definitely a goal to get that done. It's part of the future vision for that garden space. So you just gotta work on it little by little. So there are the plans for the 2 garden plots that we're gonna have this year. I'm sure a month from now, when the snow's actually melted and we can start to lay down landscape fabric and stake out our rows, it'll be exciting to start to see all of the dreams and visions that we've been putting together in our minds and on paper during the winter to come to life. But you also got to be able to adapt when you're having a garden, so you never know what might change too. I will keep you guys updated. Happy garden planning.